All right, so we're going to go through the review for Unit 2, Summative number 1. So first thing that we had talked about was domain and range. So domain is always referring to your x values. Range is always referring to your y values. So we can represent that a few different ways, but you always have points, like x comes first, y comes second. So these, there was just a couple rules. So you have to list from smallest to biggest. And then you can't list any repeats. Okay, so if you see something happen more than once, you just write it once. So your x values are always the first number, and you just have to put them in order. So I'm not going to put 2 first. I'm actually going to put -2 first. Next biggest would be 1, and then 2, and then 3. And then we put these fancy brackets on the ends just to say that's a set. Okay, same thing for the y's. I'm just going to underline all my y values, figure out the smallest one. So that's 4. Now there are 2 4s. Okay, so I'm just going to write it once, and then 5, and then 7. Okay, so list your x's, list your y's. To tell if something is a function or not, you are looking at your x values, only the x values. And if you see any repeats in your x's, then it is not a function. This one has no repeat x values. So that means that, yes, this one passes. It's okay that there's y's that repeat. Okay, so maybe why don't you pause me, try number 2, and then we'll check it. Okay, so this one, your domain, your x values, will go -1 first. Now there is another one, but we're just going to write it once, and then 4, and then 5. And then your x values, your y values, the smallest one would be -3, then -2, 2, and 6. Okay, then hopefully you said that this one is not a function because there's a repeating x value. Okay, so that -1 that happens twice means it's not a function. All right, so number 3 is kind of the same way. You're just looking at your x values. We're just saying yes or no if this is a function. There are no repeats, so yes, this one is a function. Okay, the other 2 are graphs. That's when we do this vertical line test. So if you take a vertical line and you drag it through your graph, for it to be a function, it's not allowed to touch your graph more than once. Well, this one, if I stop it at any point, it's touching twice, so this one does not pass. Okay, now if I do the same thing with this last one, drag a vertical line, it's only touching once. So that one passes, so this one, yes, is a function. All right, number 6 and 7, these are evaluating. So it says for f of x, you have this function, and then it says find f of -3. That number right there is always replacing x, like we always see f of x. Okay, so this means plug in -3 for x. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite my function, but anywhere I see an x, I'm going to plug in a -3. So there's one right here, put the squared. There's also one right here. And then you could just type this right into a calculator. Could do it by hand. So -3 squared, that's +9. 3 times -3, that's -9. Again, you could just type this right into a calculator. -18 plus -9, that's -27 minus 4. So final answer, we should get -33. Okay, so why don't you pause me, try number 7, come back. All right, so hopefully you took x, made it into a 7. And then again, you could just type this right into a calculator. 35 minus 8, that should be 27. Okay, so that's evaluating. You're just plugging something in. All right. Next part, domain and range of a graph. So this is where we're going to use interval notation. Okay, so remember, we're going to use parentheses for infinities, and then we're going to use brackets for numbers. Okay, so you have to think about your end caps, and you can mix and match. So just like before, domain is your x's, range is your y's. Okay, so x's always means left to right, because that's your x-axis. So this graph has an arrow, so it's going to keep going left, and it's going to keep going right. So if it keeps going left, that means it starts at -infinity, and if it keeps going right, it goes to +infinity. And then we said infinities always get those end caps that are parentheses. Okay, range is the y values. And again, we always go small to big, so this is going to be the lowest number to the highest number. Okay, so we start low. Well, since these are pointing down, so yes, it's left, yes, it's right, but it's also down. That means I'm starting at negative infinity, right? That's down forever. But then I'm not going to positive infinity. My highest y value is right here, which is at 3. Okay, and then a number gets a bracket. Okay, so why don't you pause me, try number 10, come back. All right, so the domain on number 10. So again, this is your x value, so left to right. There's no arrow pointing to the left, but this is starting right here at -4. Numbers get brackets. And it's going all the way to the right, so it's going forever that way, so that means it's going to infinity. Okay, for the range, again, that's your y, so that's low to high. So we're starting down low. We're saying, what's our very first y value? Well, it's right here, but it's not -4. That's the x. We're starting here, which means that your y value is actually 0, and then it is going up and up and up forever, just going slowly. So that's what your range would look like. Okay, so that's domain and range. All right, next part was graphing. So you have two forms. There's y equals mx plus b, and then there's also y minus y1 equals mx minus x1. Okay, that's point slope. This is slope intercept. We didn't actually do standard. Okay, so remember m is always for slope in both of these. In slope intercept form, b is the y-intercept, and that's where you start. Okay, so let's start on that one. So that last number, 7, that's your y-intercept. That's where we start. That's on your y-axis. So we'll always go up or down. This one's positive, so I'm going to go up, put a point at 7. Okay, now this number, the number in front of x, that's always your slope. Okay, so this is -2/5. You can put that negative on the top. Rise over run means we're going to go down 2. Positive means right, right 5. So from that green point, I'm going to go down 2, right 5. You can do it again. Down 2, right 5. Make it go all the way through. Put arrows. You got a line. Okay, so that's slope intercept form. The other one, so we already started this one, and then in this case, the x1 and the y1, those are a point on the line. Just a random point, not necessarily the y-intercept. Okay, so when we say what's the slope and what's the point, you can get that right from the equation. Okay, so the slope, we said that is always m, so that's whatever's right in front of the parentheses. So that's -4. Okay, now -4, whole numbers, we like fractions for slopes just so we can do rise over run. So a whole number, you can always put it over 1. Okay, when we find the point, this is where it's a little tricky. You have to start with x. So what's the number with x? Okay, point is always an x and a y. However, that minus sign in the form of the equation makes you pick the opposite. So it's actually not +1, it's -1. And then same thing for y. It's not -3, it's +3. Okay, so I'm going to start with that point. So that's where I'm going to start. So -1, 3. And then my slope says down 4, right 1. And you can do that again. And then you got a line. Okay, so that's graphing. Oh, we got one more. How about you guys try this one? So let's just clarify for a second. There's no number in front of the x because this is slope intercept. So you need the m. Remember, if there's no number, there is an invisible 1, which is really like 1/1. Okay, so take a minute, pause me, graph this, and then come back. All right, hopefully you put your first point at -6, and then this one you're just going up 1, right 1, up 1, right 1, up 1, right 1, and you can do that a whole bunch of times, and you got your line. Okay, so it should look like that. All right, last piece is writing equations. So number 17 says write an equation in slope-intercept form. First thing is remember what that looks like. That's what my answer should look like. Okay, so I need the slope, I need the y-intercept. Well, it says the slope is 2/3, so that's your m. and it says the y-intercept is 11, so that's your b. So you actually have all the information here. So this is 2/3 x. You always leave the y in the x, plus 11. Easy peasy, that's it. Okay, next one's a little trickier. So again, slope-intercept form. So again, my answer should look like this. Now we do have the slope, so that's your m. But this one, they give us a point. So a point is not a y-intercept, but a point is an x and a y. Okay, so I'm actually going to plug these in. So instead of y, so let me write this again. Instead of y, I'm going to write 3, because that's what that says. M is 2/3. Instead of x, I'll also write 3. And we don't know what b is. So b is what we're trying to find. Okay, you could grab a calculator. If you multiply 2/3 times 3, that's actually 2. These 3's actually just cancel. But you could use a calculator. Okay, minus 2. So b is 1. Okay, so now we need to go back to our equation. And then we leave the y, we leave the x. So m was 2/3. And we just found b to be 1. All right, 2 more. So number 19, this one I want point slope form. So this one, my answer should look like this. So I need my slope and I need a point. Okay, so this one, the slope, it says write an equation in point slope form through this point. So we have our point. Okay, we got that. But then it says we want it perpendicular to this line. So the slope of that line is 1/4. The slope that we want is perpendicular to that. So remember, perpendicular slopes have opposite reciprocals. Okay, so the opposite reciprocal of 1/4 means flip it to 4/1 and make it negative. That's the slope that we want. Okay, so for this one, we're going to go leave the y minus, now y1 is going to be that -3. The slope we just found is -4/1, x minus, then we're going to plug in 2. Okay, minus a negative really becomes a plus. And that's it. Okay, if you want, pause me, try number 20, come back, we'll check it. All right, so again, point slope form. Okay, we have a point, so this is your x1 and your y1. Now this one says parallel to this. So here's your slope. Parallel lines have same slopes. So all I need to do is look at the equation given to me and say -3 is my m, so that's the m I'm going to use right here. Okay, so we can go y minus your y value, which is 7, equals -3. That's your slope. X minus your x value, which is -5. And then minus a negative really becomes a positive. Okay, so hopefully you've tried the questions that have popped up, and then let your teacher know when you're ready to do a retake. All right, thank you.